Is they do reflect society. That's why we pay so much attention, partly. And things are always changing in our industry, like streaming. It just changed the whole industry. This happens so often. So they have to come up with new categories for the awards. The Golden Globes came up with a new one this year. They're basically a picture people liked. They had, they had become such self-congratulating, virtue-signaling bores that they had to go, oh yeah, let's make a category for that. People actually paid to see something. Talking about the slap, but I'm sorry, one more thing needs to be said. Comedians have been under attack for quite some time, and I need to stick up for my tribe. This war on jokes must end.
Out of nowhere, Bill Maher storms into the spotlight with a blistering, no-holds-barred critique of the Oscars, accusing organizers of surrendering to the tides of woke culture, and what follows is nothing short of a full-throttle takedown as he rips into award shows for transforming into stages for political grandstanding and applause-chasing moments, delivering his message with a sharp edge that feels both relentless and unforgiving. So, if you're here for unfiltered commentary like this, smash that subscribe button. Now,
if you ever want to win an election again, the absolute most important first step is stop doing this.
We gather in celebration of the Oscars on the ancestral lands of the Tongva, Tataviam, and Chumash peoples, the traditional caretakers of this water and land.
Yeah, I don't know if we're still saying cringe. But if we are, that's this. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Either give the land back or shut the up.
lately, the celebrity world feels less like a space for genuine thought and more like a chaotic race where stars scramble to outdo each other with the most bizarre, headline-grabbing political takes imaginable, all in pursuit of going viral, where substance takes a backseat to applause, attention, and a flood of social media validation. And in that frenzy to appear bold or fearless, few seem to pause and consider what they're actually saying or whether it carries any real weight. Which is exactly where Bill Maher draws the line, calling out what he sees as a spectacle of hollow hypocrisy, arguing that while these figures excel at dramatic speeches and performative outrage, they fall short when it comes to meaningful action, urging them to step beyond the spotlight and prove their commitment in the real world. Because in his eyes, slogans and award show theatrics aren't activism, they're just performance dressed up as purpose.
Right, the moment 50 years ago that transformed the Oscar telecast into what it is today. A 4-hour lecture on how bad most people have it by the people who have it the best. But let's talk about the progress part, because people today don't seem to have a realistic view of how progress works. For example, do you know who Time Magazine's Man of the Year was in that year of 1973? Me neither, because who cares? The point is Time Magazine was still calling their award the Man of the Year. Time Magazine, another pillar of liberal enlightenment like the Oscars, but it only changed the name to Person of the Year in 1999.
There's a sharp truth in Maher's argument that cuts through the noise, pointing to a striking contradiction where some of the loudest critics of America are also among its most privileged beneficiaries, individuals living lives of extraordinary wealth, influence, and opportunity, yet painting a picture of a nation in complete decline, a narrative that feels almost surreal when contrasted with the very system that enabled their rise. And while no country is without flaws, the progress made over time has created the foundation for their success, allowing them to thrive in ways millions can only dream of, which is why Maher's message lands with such force. Before declaring everything broken, perhaps it's worth recognizing the freedoms and opportunities that made such success possible in the first place.
The Oscars is they do reflect society. That's why we pay so much attention, partly. And things are always changing in our industry, like streaming. It just changed the whole industry. This happens so often. So they have to come up with new categories for the awards. The Golden Globes came up with a new one this year that basically a picture people liked. They had, they had become such self-congratulating, virtue-signaling bores that they had to go, oh yeah, let's make a category for that. People actually paid to see something great.
With that same intensity, Maher shifts his focus directly onto the Oscar organizers, accusing them of bending over backward to satisfy the loudest and most demanding voices, painting a picture of an academy increasingly obsessed with introducing new categories and rule changes not to celebrate filmmaking, but to appease what he describes as the ever-watchful guardians of woke culture. And in his view, these decisions feel forced, confusing, and detached from what everyday movie fans actually care about, as the ceremony drifts further away from honoring storytelling, acting, and directing, the very elements that once made it a cultural phenomenon, and instead slides into something preachy and uninspired, all while ratings fall and audiences quietly tune out, leaving Maher to question why the Academy seems more focused on pleasing a narrow vocal fringe than reconnecting the broader audience that once made the Oscars a must-watch event.
So there's new Oscar categories. Would you like to hear the Oscar I knew you would. I knew you would want to hear them. For example, this was needed. Best editing of a film that's still an hour too long. Achievement in ethnic prosthetics. Best achievement in replacing an actor who tweeted something offensive.
Leaning into satire, Maher takes aim at what he jokingly frames as these so-called award categories, making it clear they aren't meant to be taken at face value, but rather serve as a pointed critique of Hollywood's growing obsession with symbolism over substance, using exaggeration as a mirror to reflect what he era as an industry increasingly driven by optics instead of excellence, where recognition feels less about genuine achievement and more about ticking the right boxes to satisfy critics online. And through this lens, his punchline lands with biting clarity. If the Oscars are going to keep inventing awards to appease the loudest voices on social media, then why not fully embrace it and start handing out trophies for the most fashionable outrage or the most viral political speech?
Have been under attack for quite some time, and I need to stick up for my tribe. This war on jokes must end. So tonight, let's Zapruder film this thing once and for all and explain jokes to.
Expanding his critique, Maher turns toward what he calls the woke mob, describing a cultural force that he believes has spent years scrutinizing and targeting comedians, arguing that comedy has long been one of the last spaces where ideas can be challenged and cultural norms playfully questioned. Yet now that freedom feels increasingly under siege, as even a single joke that strays from accepted narratives can ignite immediate backlash, with social media erupting, clips stripped of context, and demands for apologies or cancellations spreading at lightning speed, transforming what was once a simple moment of humor into a full-blown controversy, creating an atmosphere where comedians hesitate, second-guess, and brace themselves for waves of outrage that seem designed not just to criticize, but to make their lives significantly harder.
Now, at the Oscars, Chris Rock came out to present a boring award and first did what he is supposed to do, get some laughs doing what we comics call crowd work. Denzel and Javier Bardem each got spritzed. And then Chris made what in the business is known as a "some shit is like some other shit" joke. He said to Jada Smith, "Jada can't wait for G.I. Jane 2, recalling the late 90s movie starring Demi Moore. That's it. That's the joke. You remind me of some other beautiful, buzz-cutted movie star. It wasn't an alopecia joke any more than the one about the chicken crossing the road is about bird flu."
To illustrate his point, Maher points back to that unforgettable Oscars moment when Will Smith walked onto the stage and struck Chris Rock following a joke about Jada, describing it as a defining example of the growing tension surrounding comedy, where what should have been a routine, spontaneous roast, something comedians have done for decades at award shows, spiraled into one of the most shocking incidents in the event's history. And in Maher's view, Rock's remark was never intended as a cruel attack, but rather a typical light jab aimed at a high-profile figure, the kind of humor that has always been part of the tradition. Yet the reaction it provoked revealed something deeper, symbolizing a cultural shift where even mild jokes can ignite intense outrage, confrontation, and reactions that feel wildly disproportionate.
Not an insult, although insult humor is also a staple of comedy. And in fact, an example of insulting someone's looks was on display that night when Regina Hall said, "We've been dealing with COVID for 2 years. It's been really hard on people." And Amy Schumer said, "Yeah, just look at Timothy Chalamet," and they cut to J.K. Simmons. Who made a face a lot like the one Jada would make later on. But that's where it ended. It's called being a good sport, especially when you're a rich celebrity. Let the common people take the piss out of you for one stinking minute.
From there, Maher makes a broader appeal, urging celebrities to loosen up and rediscover the ability to laugh at themselves, reminding them that comedy, at its core, isn't meant to wound or destroy, but to entertain, to offer playful jabs that humanize even the biggest stars, creating moments where audiences can connect through shared imperfections and laughter, bringing larger-than-life figures back down to earth, if only briefly, and in his eyes, that's the essence of humor. Spontaneous, harmless, and rooted in joy. Not a weapon, not a declaration of conflict, but a simple invitation for everyone, including everyday Americans, to laugh together.
And importantly, Chris's joke was received as funny. As evidenced by the audience and Will Smith laughing. And this is the moment where we got to see a live-action, real-time encapsulation of how cancel culture works. Look at what happens next. Jada shoots her husband a look. Let's slow the tape down to capture this moment. There. Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Building on that, Maher lays out what Yura as the blueprint of the outrage machine, where everything begins with a joke that lands in the room as intended, light, harmless, and even embraced by those present, only for the real storm to begin afterward, as people far removed from the moment dissect clips online, reframe the narrative, and declare offense where none initially existed, gradually transforming a fleeting comedic into a supposed controversy, until the internet collectively decides that someone must be outraged, often even instructing the person involved on how they should feel. And in Maher's view, that's where the cycle truly takes hold, as manufactured anger replaces common sense and humor fades into the background.
Is laughing because he hasn't yet found out that his original genuine reaction is wrong and that he should conform to a different view. And he's the one who's being manly? I've seen the same syndrome happen in comedy clubs. Woke hecklers who literally have to wait for the laughter to die down before they yell, "That's not funny!"
As the dust settles, Maher's larger message comes into focus, painting a picture of an entertainment landscape where comedy, culture, and even basic common sense are being squeezed by an environment that rewards outrage over honesty. From award shows chasing political validation to comedians navigating a minefield of potential backlash, leaving behind the spontaneity and unpredictability that once defined the industry. And in its place emerges something far more cautious and restrained, prompting his call for a reset. A return to perspective, where not every joke is treated as an attack and not every comment spirals into a public meltdown, because without that balance, he warns, comedy risks becoming sterile, stripped of its joy and vitality. And with that thought lingering, we bring this video to a close. If you enjoyed the ride, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one.